Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Differentiate Understanding. Today's episode is very special because we're not only interviewing the CEO to talk about his product and business, but the conversation is really about humanity in many ways. It's about how we nurture it in the next generation of children amid all the fast growth technology. It's a topic close to my heart. As many of you know, I'm a mother of two under three, and I'm constantly thinking about what fast evolving technology, and especially AI, will mean for their future. So joining me today is the founder of Dex Camera, Reni Cao, someone who has been trying to change the way we think about tech and children and create more mindful, children-first technology. We first met in San Francisco and I was immediately fascinated by his product. Given that I have two little ones that are being raised in a trilingual environment, I really thought everything he showed me made sense. Anyway, I want to pass the mic to him and have him tell me more about the thinking, the design, and even the guardrails. Benny, let's start with your personal story. Who are you, and who are your team members? Because when I met you in SF, I was so enamored by the product, and I thought your story was so interesting. So please share that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reni, CEO and co-founder of Dex. We're a technology company in San Francisco, almost all parent company, which is pretty special in a startup setting. We're a bunch of parents that having trouble with the same kind of like a reality where like our education system is a sort of like cookie cutter and our entertainment is also cookie cutter for children. So we're like, can we harness like technology, especially the latest development of the AI in different way for families that really gives children a chance to become the best version of themselves and give the digital autonomy back to parents themselves rather than accepting the fact they have to struggle between technology versus no technology. So yeah, we're the parents kind of like a bunch of missionaries and in this journey together to explore how can we make the best use of the AI. And our first product is called Dex, the language learning camera, where kids can take pictures and turn the whole world into language immersions. And it's a product targeting young children 3 to 8. And we've sold 10,000 pieces so far. And ratings has been high and we're pretty excited about this. But yeah, this is pretty much about us.
Okay. But Reddy, tell us a bit about what you did before Dex, actually. What kind of led you to this path? I know becoming a parent really did inspire you. You have a young daughter, I think similar age to mine, around 3 years old. But before that, what really led you to this path? Were you always passionate about children's tech or education?
I actually have been a product management guy for the last decade in Silicon Valley. Some big companies like YouTube and LinkedIn, some smaller Zenefits, Wish, but I have been a builder since the beginning. I would actually say that my passion for Dex actually originated much earlier than I started my career. It's actually started right when I was at school, but happy to say more if you're interested.
Yeah, no, tell us a personal story there.
So I was always this random kid with tons of questions back in high school. And very unfortunately, I think the education system, especially East Asian countries, is not designed for meet kids where they are. So every time when I come up with a random question, my teachers are usually a little bit impatient and they'll be like, can you just go back and finish your quiz, etc., etc. So the moment I saw when GPT-4 comes out, I was thrilled. And I posted a long like blurb on LinkedIn, basically saying like, if I have this as a kid, I would have grown into a more complete human. So this kind of like, I feel like this like generative AI's capability to meet kids where they are, especially meets your needs for curiosity, it's game changing. So I feel like I'm building this product first and foremost for a younger me that could have benefited so much from this. That's pretty much the story about me. Yeah, and we see, and of course, our parents right now, we see there is a tectonic shift in terms of the skill landscape and what the future of workforce going to be, and even the existential challenge of what does human mean in a future society. So we do want to build something that's centered around children, centered around the family, to help them find what they love and build agencies around it. at the end of the day. So yeah, that's the two main driving force of me coming to Dex. But I would be honest about it. It's like very random. When I start a company, a lot of my colleagues are very surprised, being like, oh my God, Reni, you're getting into this field. But yeah, I guess I finally find the work of my life.
I love it. I think you need to understand the passion and the personal reason behind the businesses to really understand why the design was frankly so intuitive and why you're so passionate about building this and leaving such a comfy, like cushy corporate role. I think that's the one thing that stuck out to me. The product itself is actually so natural to how children behave. To your point, like my 3-year-old, from morning to night, morning she wakes up, it's like, Mommy, what's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? How do you say this? Why do you know that? Sometimes she gets angry at me if I don't know something. She'd be like, "But you're an adult. You should know everything." But the reality, especially with languages, is it's really difficult. So, for example, yesterday she was coming back from her Mandarin class and she said "liu shu." She was pointing at a random tree, and I was like, "That's not liu shu." All I know is not liu shu, but I actually don't know what liu shu is in English because I think it's only really common in mainland. I've never seen that kind of tree. Oh, well, I guess it's a willow tree. You don't see it very commonly elsewhere. And then she kept on pointing at trees, but in Hong Kong, you clearly don't have liu shu because Hong Kong, it's like tropical. And then she got really, really mad at me. And that moment, I was like, wow, if we had a Dex camera, that would have been perfect. But I was literally trying to take a picture of it while we're moving car and trying to upload it to GPT, be like, what tree is this? What's the name of it? So anyway, I think it's really great product design. And I want to kind of get into that a little bit. When you were designing it, what was the thinking? Like, what does it mean to be children first?
I think there are 3 layers of children first as a principle. The first layer, we already touched upon that, right? So young children, their hand dexterity is very different from adults. They tend to use one hand to operate a device, and another hand they want to use for sensory explorations, like they want to touch. Sometimes they want to just like move things around. So this requires a different form factor that one-handed use, very tactile, very intuitive for young children, such that they can like explore the world while harnessing the power of AI in this case. So this is kind of like the special things about the user. That's a different design. I think that's the layer number one. I think the layer number two is also that the device itself is a metaphor for the market as well. And in the we want to build something that's drastically from the so-called adult-centric smart devices, namely phones and tablets, to send the market a message that there could be a different option. There could be a good technology. There could be a family-centric technology. And we've picked this form factor utilizing the metaphor of a magnifying glass. It is something you use to see some hidden wonders. Otherwise, you cannot see. I do think kind of like that's the second layer of the things, which is like metaphor and the category like creation. And at the end of the day, I do think we intentionally make the device we're finding this like a fine balance between engagement and learning, or kind of like a healthy aspect of the technology, meaning like we add assistive screen, but we make it really kind of like limited and not the center of the whole kind of like a user journey. And we want to kind of like find a new way to put all the components in our consumer electronics world in a way that it strikes a more delicate balance and let the device itself to be kind of like retentive for children without getting them to be addicted. So it's kind of like we intentionally make it a little less stimulating, actually much less stimulating than a lot of adult-centric product. So that's the main 3 kind of like principles around the product design. There's a lot of conflicting constraints here, as you can see, but we do our best trying to find what is the answer. And here we go. Like what you see right now is our first, answer we have thought through. And I think the market validated the answer quite well so far.
Yeah, definitely. I think to exactly to your point, like a lot of times, I think when we as young parents looking at introducing technology to children, really worried about the big screens, addictive nature, or even the parental, even though a lot of them allow parental control, it's the unlimited access to a wild, wild internet out there. Like all of these things are basically concerns and or reasons why we hold back technology from our kids. So actually on that note, I do think you kind of mentioned it, right? Like technology over the years, especially big tech, frankly, has garnered a bit of a bad reputation. And I think that was really tied to the rise of social media and a lot of this mental illness that came with it. And obviously, like you mentioned, the addictive nature. So what do you think is actually harmful to children's development when we are looking at tech? What are areas actually we can really embrace technology. I think you kind of touched on it lightly. Maybe explain it to us an even deeper, more technical way.
Yeah. Our thesis is that why a lot of parents think technology is negative for a good reason. And the reason is that all the main status quo technology for children are built on top of the attention economy, as we call it. Everything revolves around time spent and how much attention, how much engagement in terms of like a minute, seconds, sessions you can get. That sadly is the reality because think about it. You build an app on an iPad, immediately you're entering a competition with Roblox, with YouTube Kids, with all the videos, all sorts of things out there. You could do well. You can try to like do good for the society, for the families, but you're effectively competing against more like addictive, kind of like a form factor of information. And it's a losing battle. And as we call it, it's a rat race. Such no matter what type of like educational apps or content you're trying to deliver, at the end of the day, you have to deliver them in more and more engaging way, more and more gamified, more and more animation used, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's why it's another reason why we need hardware at the end of the day. I think the first step, how we can create alternative reality, is that we need to create a new world, a new kingdom where the business is built upon outcome rather than attention. Meaning like it's not the time spent logic anymore. It's like, can you use this device? For example, for Dex, you can use the device and you see the child speaks better after 2 months, or the kid starts to have a love to speak Mandarin, and that preserved the rest of their childhood. I do think there is a business model there like that, but I believe that business model warrant a totally kind of like a different design of the experience from ground up, from the device layer to the software, to the content, all the way to like user interaction. So I do think like that's why the current technology is considered bad, because it's a rat race towards attention. And I think ultimately inside Dex, I believe the final answer to create that alternates like a reality is, can we deliver something that's purpose-built for children before we build a general sort of like time spent logic, like a product? In the case of the Dex, it is something that, purpose-built around the languages. It cannot do a lot of things. It's not a chatbot. It cannot play videos, but I do think even do one thing super well with the frontier technology already delivers so much value to the families, such that you can build a viable business model on top of that while creating values for families. I think being courageous enough to limit our scope to something to begin with, like really hold on to our principle, deliver a promise, create values there, is another, like internally, is kind of like our operating principle to get there in terms of how to harness the technology. And I want to say that it's very interestingly, what we noticed that is a lot of people are trying to use the AI in a quite an all-in-one way. So you can see a little device with tons of features in it. You can generate pictures, and you can talk to celebrities, a chatbot, like you can talk to Elon Musk on that device. And we think actually that will be a very slippery slope in terms of harnessing the technology at the end of the day. So yeah, purpose-built is another very critical principle we're hold on to create a good technology.
No, I love that. But I mean, from a business perspective, sometimes people might not have purpose-built businesses, right? Unfortunately, some are not. Then, thus, how do we basically help the industry align the business incentive to the product design incentive? Because, like what you're saying right now, it makes a lot of sense. And I think once I saw Dex Camera, I was like, wow, why is there not something like this on the market? But it does feel like there's a huge gap where, like you said, there is a big devices and a big tech. There's these tiny niche little products, whether it's software or product or hardware for children's use, but it doesn't feel like people are taking it seriously, even though we all know parents are willing to spend on children if it's for their good. It's not like the economics doesn't make sense. So why is there's that gap right now?
I think you're hitting on one of our most recent realization, that the parenting needs and the children's needs are quite long tail, or as we call it, very like versatile, right? Different parents have different parenting needs. Even when you look at the language as an example, there are tons of different languages and even more dialects you want to learn. Like let's say you want to learn Mandarin, you still get so many like dialects there. there hasn't been a real kind of like technology that can enable a venture scale business that attracts talent, that attracts a good backing in terms of like a capital to build something that's like a generational. But I do think this is the moment AI is getting strong. We finally have to make sure we can build one system that can consolidate all those long tail needs. Even for Dex very specifically, you can learn a lot of languages and even more dialects with just like a 9-person team building the hardware plus software. I think it's the catalyst that's much bigger than Dex itself. And I'm really excited about that. But I think another very interesting angle is like, despite the technology is there, you have another question. It's like why there is not more company like Dex. I have a personal opinion here, right? When new technology comes up, people will tend to use it in the most, sloppiest way possible. They were trying to just like, okay, you can chat with the AI, so why don't we just shovel AI into a little box and put it into a talking fluffy and call it like an AI toy, and that's it. That's my business, right? I do think it is it is like a gravity that's pulling people away from deeply think how to harness this technology and pulling them towards something that's so trivial and it's just almost like a shortcut. I think that's kind of like I would call that a trap on the entrepreneur side, that the technology changes so fast that everyone's FOMOing, everyone just want to use it in some way. But I think in this sense, we as Dex, the company, we believe in that we need to think very deep about how should we use this technology to meet users where they are and deploy like AI in certain ways such that we can deliver the value. So that's why we start small, but we're going to
Yeah.
expand from there.
It makes a lot of sense, but I wonder if you guys all being parents, like you just said, have made a huge difference. I hate to overgeneralize, but like, I've been in the tech space for 10 years, but usually either I meet men who are like 20 years older than me, or they're very young men who have not, settled into a family yet. And I'm just saying, when I tell people I'm my mom, it scares people. They're like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, okay, like I'm not trying to scare you off by telling I'm a mother, but the reality is what most of us one day will all have families. And when we do, we start thinking about the things around us very differently. Our perspectives shift. And I think to your point, when you guys had a lot of purpose designing this product, I wonder if it has a lot of, you know, reason because you guys are parents. Whereas if someone is an entrepreneur for the sake of being a business person, they might not have the nuanced understanding of what a kid needs and what they even think is good for a kid. So to your point, they create little stuffed animals with an LM plugged into it, which is horrendously scary. I would never introduce that to my kid, right? I'm
Me
getting like
neither.
very, very agitated by this. But like another one that we talked about kind of offline was like I should be an ambassador and be paid by Tony Box at this point because I probably gifted at least like 20 of them out to friends with kids. I think they're just like on the surface, you think about it, they're like a little box that plays music. You're like, oh, this is so easy. I can just use my iPhone. It's exactly to your point. It gives the kids agency, allows the kids to start navigating the world themselves and have preferences. For context, for people who don't have Tony boxes or kids at this point, is you put these little miniature IPs, essentially they're Disney or whatnot, and you can put them on the little box. It has a magnet, and then the box just starts singing and has like 7 or 8 pre-programmed music or stories, and
Stories.
then you can control with your little hands. And basically, like you press the big ear, the ear just like the volume goes up, the small ear, the volume goes down. It's like really, really great. So basically introduce technology to kids where they're like, oh, mom, I can control what I want to listen to today. But I don't need to nag you about it to control the iPhone. I don't get exposed to a screen. And I can sit there and be entertained for like half an hour myself. So I think Dex really falls into that category for me. We kind of skip the part where we explain how your technology work really in a very day-to-day way. It's basically like you hold the camera, you point at things, you click the button, you can say, what is this? And you default choose languages, right? You actually explain it better than me, please.
There are actually 4 questions here, so I want to actually react to all of them one by one. I think there's a lot of like good insights here. I think Tony Box and Dex share one thing in common, which is like they are children led or they're child led in this case. Think like in the POV of a child. The world is a kind of like a scary place that you're told to do this or that. You are brought to here or there. There's not much quote unquote autonomy you could have. But now there's a device that your parents actually are willing to let you operate, and you can decide what type of content, media, or interactions you can get. that is just a huge reward to children's like unlimited curiosity and their like a strong needs to be considered sort of like, a big kid or even a grown up in a way. Right? I think that's the intricate magic that if you were not a parent or you haven't interacted with children a lot, you would miss. Instead of saying like a parents made us a better, product builder, I think at the end of the day, it goes back to the product 101 that you really need to know your user. You really need to know who are using your product. We spend such a long time with our kids every day. And early days, which is very funny, like the first group of users using Dex is just our own children. And that gives us a huge edge there, right? And I do think you mentioned that a lot of like startup founders in this category, sometimes they're doing something will raise the eyebrow of the parents. I do think they're a little bit distant from the kids is one reason. And another reason is I do think there's a misconception that children are less. At the end of the day, a lot of founders think, those are toys, those are gimmicky stuff. Kids, you just give them something that they can flash, they can make some sound, and children would love to use them. But I reject that answer. I think that assumption is completely wrong. Children are actually smarter than adults in certain way. They just cannot verbalize it. But as I said, they already got their little taste, as the famous word, right? Popular words are. They got their taste, and they sometimes can tell what's a soulful piece of story versus is a very like sloppy kind of like story. So children actually knows that, and they want quality experience. They want quality product. They can actually absorb something that's really built well for them. I think that just gives us kind of this endless sort of motivation to polish our product as if we're building this for the most critical sets of like adult users, because we think actually children are more and they deserve more. Now, coming back to how Dex works at the end of the day, right? I think the core loop of Dex is quite simple. You just take the little camera. I'm happy to actually send a video to like be the B-roll here. You just like take a picture and it will just literally tell you, let me actually take a selfie here. Hi. Let's see what I'm going to learn about this.
Look at that big smile. It's like spreading happiness everywhere. Can you say a smile?
This smile. Yeah. This is like, you get unlimited like immersion.
Smile comes with some laughing too. It's when you make happy sounds, like haha. Can you say laughing?
Laughing.
Like the ones we use to listen to music. Do you like music too? Can you say headphones?
This is actually English immersive mode, so you can improve your vocabulary there.
How many languages do you have now?
We have 16 languages and more than 30 dialects, and it's still expanding. And the interesting observation here is like the smaller, the more niche the languages is, the stronger the demand is there, which we find is super interesting.
Probably just harder to find offline solutions otherwise, right? Or like harder with the communities. Assuming you're in SF, finding a Mandarin community is not that difficult. If you're in England, finding a French community, probably not as difficult. But if you go, you were saying like maybe like Arabic, languages like that are not as mainstream. Maybe in San Fran, you have people in San Fran wanting to do that, right? Or like people in Dallas, last time you said, trying to learn Mandarin, which again, you don't have a huge community. Very interesting. I'm sorry I got very passionate about the topic. So I want to kind of swerve back to our conversation here about, raising children with technology. I'm sure you get a pushback. I think people right now, there's the other side of the argument where everything should be organic, everything should be like very simple. And I myself, I'm a big fan of a lot of the Montessori toys. They're not buttons, they're not even power charged, they're just little wooden blocks, but they're designed very well for them to, develop motor skills. So how do you kind of explain to parents today who are saying technology should be rejected in the childhood? Kids should just be reading physical books, should learn the way that we learned or even like previous generation learned. We should go back to touching grass only. So what's your argument there?
First of all, you're completely right. Every once in a while, we got a comment on our social media that why don't you talk to your own daughter to teach that language? Why you need a device to do that? So your assumption is completely right. And my response to that is, first of all, actually, I respect that parent a lot. I believe in the most ideal world, organic human-to-human interaction and free play in the real world is great. There's a lot of researchers actually prove that right? However, I do think the parent miss out constraints here. Number one, you may want to talk to your daughter, but you don't know Cantonese, for example. So there's no way for you to teach some subjects or some skills that you want them to learn, or you want to immerse them with. And second, all of us knows the contemporary society is more and more faster paced. Not all the parents enjoy this privilege of saying, let's slow down, set up a dedicated time for children to go out to places. All sorts of this ideal family style back in the 80s, 90s changed a lot, I would say. So I believe rather than just blaming the parents not spending enough organic time with their children, I do believe that technology should be introduced more as an option, as kind of like a gap stopper, as one of the extra tools on the table. That's why when we design Dex, we don't introduce chatbot, but we spend so much time on sharing the insights that what your children are interested in. What did they take a picture of? What do they want to geek on? What did they learn today towards the parent app? And just give them this little window to see the world through their children's eyes. Give them good dinner time topic, giving them a way to reconnect, even that's asynchronous. So I do think the concern is real, and the overall kind of judgment is very well reasoned. But I think the approach here is much more nuanced than saying let's use technology to replace human. It's not. It's actually using technology to connect the humans, connect the parents and kids better. That's the nuance I have to articulate.
Yeah. No, I love it because actually I've seen some parents even give kids little Kodak cameras these days, and these little toddlers go around the world, take pictures of how they see the world, and they're so cute. My own daughter sometimes takes my phone and takes pictures around the home, and I come back with a lot of selfies and pictures of her sister's foot, or it's just very cute because you see the world through their eyes, right? And it gives it's technology doesn't take all connection away. On technology, I wanted to ask you about the technology. How do we understand that? How are you actually leveraging LLMs? How do you route through different LLMs or different languages? This is something we talked about briefly, but I wanted to understand that a bit more.
But to share details, where should we start?
How does it work? Right now, so basically for the little Dex camera, I can't ask it, to your point, you didn't build a chatbot, so I can't ask it a question. I can't have a conversation. It's not a companion, but I can ask it, what's this? How does all that work in terms of the back end technology and the guardrails you built up?
I think in a 30K feet view, I start utilizing basically all the multimodal LM capabilities to understand what the children are looking at. And on top of that, we build sort of a profile, an interest profile for the children and the parenting need profile for the parents to help contextualize, what responses should we give in that case. To give an example, if you're a 3-year-old just starting to learn Cantonese, and you are sort of interested in a bunch of a museum topics, so you love dinosaur skeletons and stuff like that, we will render you more challenges around kind of hey, let's bring Dex to a museum and learn about different terms there. And it will be English, the primary languages, teaching entry-level Cantonese things there. So basically the visual understanding, you certainly use multimodal LLM. The response definitely use kind of a conversation API of a lot of a LLM. And I think building out this context layer or this memory layer of a children's interest and parenting needs, that actually is more complex. That takes a kind of a full agentic system to try to understand what matters, condensing or distill insights into a profile and gradually kind of injecting that into our responses. I think that's on a very high level. That's it. We do use a wide range of LLM, mostly with Gemini and OpenAI. And that's kind of the high levels.
I'm going to ask a question you might not like, but I'm going to put you on the spot. When we talked last time, you said specifically on Cantonese and Mandarin, you do use different LMs, but the accents can be quite funny. They're a bit off. They're not native sounding. Why is that? And how do you overcome something like that? For other maybe non-English languages. Yeah.
First of all, you need to try again because we have a solution already. But definitely we are already squeezing LM so hard that we're hitting the boundary of a lot of in this case, it's a TTS of the leading providers. Because think about it, I'm pretty sure you're using English, right? English plus Cantonese. It's basically using English to learn Cantonese. Is that the case?
Yes.
It's a mixed language use cases. The challenge there is that without fine tuning, there is very limited sample of someone that speaks very good English and very good Cantonese, and they mix them in one sentences. So the training data to begin with is a little flawed. Either you have accent English or Cantonese, that's the more common cases. That's the fundamental root causes of this. And we're having kind of like heavy lifting tasks to kind of like solve that. And with the foundational model getting better and better, I think one day we'll get there, and we can see that to be kind of fully fleshed out in the next sort of like 6 months. You definitely hold us accountable. And I think this is the right observation. For mixed languages, it's really hard.
Yeah, I bet. So how does it actually work right now? Like in terms of economics, like people pay you about $249, right? That's the price of the product pre-tax. That's not cheap. Like it's much more expensive than a toy, but obviously a bit cheaper than an iPad. How do I understand the pricing decision there and then how does that relate to, I guess, how you pay for your token usage right now? Does that cover it?
Yeah. Oh, big time. We actually have a pretty healthy margin, and the tokens are getting incredibly cheap, much cheaper than where we started. I'm talking about like 96, 97. They were a fraction of the token cost of where compared to when we just getting started, which is back in 2024, February. At that time, we don't even have GPT-4. We have GPT 3.5. That's the kind of like, actually that time we have GPT-4, but we don't have GPT-4o. So it's very expensive at that time. So now pricing. Actually, I have let's talk about the user-centric view and the business-centric view, right?
Okay.
On the user side, we're actually adopting this value-based pricing model, which is like, at the end of the day, language is high-value skill to acquire. I sent my daughter to language immersion in the US. I'm very embarrassed to mention how much I spent on that school. And if Dex can offer 1% lift or enhancement on top of that school, the price is fully adjusted. And much more than that. So this is what I mean by like, and very funny that you mentioned toy, right? Toy is something that you get it, you play it for a couple of days, then you don't see it, you don't worry about it. And this is not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is we want to use a relatively high price to keep ourselves honest about the like value we're delivering to the parent. Like, do we really teach a language, or do we really get the kids to fall in love speaking that language? If we do so, that price is well adjusted. If not, we're going to give you 90 days of free return period. No question asked, just return it to us. I do want to use this pricing model to push us to deliver more value for the user. So that's like one aspect of it. And on the business side, very funny, you mentioned, I hate when people box us into toy category. I don't blame them. Natural reaction, but I want to send a signal to the market that if a team of talented people, hardworking parents put their heart and soul in building a purpose-built device that harness like AI and deliver concrete results, we could get out from the stereotypical like a toy average order value band and go much higher above that. It's less about to need that, it's more kind of like I want to send a signal to prove that the market, we have enough parents waiting anxiously for something similar to this and want to pay a like perceptually higher
Premium,
price
yes.
for it, a premium for it, right? But yeah, that's kind of like we landed on that price. And it's so funny that so many people at early days tell us like, you gotta do $199 because anything that started with a 1 is night and day different than like 2. It started with 2. But I'm like launching a suicidal mission. I was like, let's actually make it start with 2, but let's deliver more value there because it's not a retail business. At the end of the day, we're trying to create a new paradigm of digital parenthood and childhood. We need to hold a high bar for ourselves. And the price is very telling, like in that case.
No, I actually agree. And I think, would you categorize yourself in the same box as Tonybox Vertical? Would you?
Not really. Tonybox is I would say they're a content business. And the same thing with Yoto. Actually, their founders have deep backgrounds in labels, music labels specifically, and
I
IPs.
see.
So they're effectively a distribution business that they're creating a new channel to distributing those IPs from Disney, from Spin Master, and et cetera, et cetera. And the other side, you can see that at Dex, we're not seeing like IP partnership or putting characters on our device. And we actually optimize for value and outcomes, like I promised to you in one of our principles.
Yeah.
So I would put ourselves in, I don't know, the de facto smart device for families.
Okay.
Just
like
very
family
honestly,
tech
the
device.
family device, the family technology, maybe like this is where we're trying to go to, but it's a completely like non-existent category before. We're still exploring that. And it may
I
change
think
how
there's
I
some
call
more
it.
similar things maybe in East Asia because the audio learning, like, even when I was very young, like I remember my grandma had a 步步高, 步步机. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like those
步步高点读
tiny little. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Basically, what it is like people learn English with it, and I think it's very, very like mainstream in China for a while. But like these things been around, I think, in East Asia because everyone is using it to literally learn English. But it's very one-dimensional. It's like one language to one language. They basically embed a dictionary, make the dictionary into a digital one, and you could ask like search questions. You could ask what this word is. The more advanced one might be even like with images, but I think I don't know. In the 90s, I didn't see any images. But yeah, it does remind me of that technology and that vertical. I haven't seen something like that too mainstream in the West growing up, I think when I was learning French and German growing up, that would have been so helpful to your point. But yeah, so I want to bring it back to, sorry, I just want to bring it back to the business. On the Tony Box comment, I do believe their business actually could be really high margin because their product is only say like 199 or something like that, right? Like the box. But each character is another $20 or $30. My daughter is drying me up here because every 2 months she asks for a new figure. But my point is, it's a great business, right? Like that thing just could keep selling. It's like Spotify and a physical thing. So would you guys have add-on any
We do.
services, software, hardware, anything?
As a lot of investor has been pushing us regarding this razor blade business model. I think for us though, what we are ultimately delivering is a business more like an app store. It's like where you can get personalized content and software for your parenting needs and for your children's growth needs at the end of the day. We launched 2 tiers of subscription so far to validate that. One tier, $10 per month, you got unlimited LTE, plus you actually got a curriculum packed in like a content library. Every day we give you one topic, and in the topic you can explore a lot of new vocabulary expression in new languages, and it's a good kind of like content to consume. And I think what's most interesting as our future vision is actually a $20 per month tier. In that tier, you can actually create activities for your children, personalized. Like Grace, you can be like, I run this podcast. I'm a podcast host. How do I explain that to my kid? And make it a little bit fun, exciting, and even adventurous, as if like the recording a podcast is a little journey. And by the way, my kid likes this way of storytelling. You could give a lot of like a prompt there that actually based on the profile, the context layer, we're going to build sort of like interactive, like a content that involves taking pictures, speaking, and just like looking at the device for like explaining what does like a podcast mean. And this tier actually got really good like attraction. And when we look at the subscription retention, it's above like 90% in 3 months. That shows early signs of product market fit. But this is what I mean by like our business at the end of the day. We are a channel to deliver like harnessed intelligence to parents such that they can build whatever content and software that adapt to their needs rather than just a purely search, then filter or control kind of like a timer. I really want the digital world to revolve around them rather than the other way around. So in this case, put it in a simple way, we give them a tool to build whatever they want, and we charge on the usages of the tool, pretty much.
No, no, I actually really see that. I love it because I think my husband was trying to even use ChatGPT for a while to create stories with my daughter. Like, be like, oh, add a
Exactly.
pig, add a dog, add a whatever, and this. And obviously, it's not made naturally for this, so the stories don't come out as, I guess, natively understandable for children. So I see where this can go. And the funny thing, you use my profession as an example. Like my daughter just thinks I talk all day. That's my job, and she thinks that her dad just sits at a computer and press buttons all day. So between the two of us, none of us are doing it much. Just talking and pressing buttons. So it'd be really great if I can, I guess, lean on technology to find a better way to explain to children modern day careers. That maybe not as easy to explain as oh, mommy's a doctor and doctors go help people and save lives, which is like what my family explained to us when we were growing up. It was very clear. I want to kind of go on a little bit more about AI and parenting. I think there's a huge discourse right now in the US, especially. I think from my point of view, where I sit in Hong Kong, in Asia, even yesterday I was speaking to someone from South Korea, a venture capitalist. They're saying that parents and society seems to be a lot more open to bring technology into their day-to-day lives. They're much more open to the idea of leaning into technology for personal use and less worried about privacy and, these kind of issues, I guess. So, at a high level, what do you think? Should we be concerned when we introduce technology to children? Like, will they, for example, taking picture themselves, that automatically goes into one of the LLMs? Is that something that we should be mindful of, or are there guardrails that can be built in?
We should be definitely mindful. That's why we enforce ZDR, zero data retention, across our stack for images. So even let's say your kid take a picture of themselves, you cannot retrieve that picture even you want. You can ping me like through my personal email. You cannot find that picture anymore. And OpenAI and Google signed contract with us to burn the picture immediately, like zero data retention on all the
See.
usages. But overall, I do think it's the company's responsibility to introduce technologies to family, and the family should hold a high bar there for sure. Because like the AI is so early and is way too powerful in a certain way, and it's like kind of like a black box in a certain way, in a lot of different ways. That I'm not that one of the technologists that wanted to like glorify AI and it is the future and stuff like that. It comes with a lot of risk, especially like unproven aspect, how it impacts the children's cognitive development and stuff, something like that. That's also a reason why we work with researchers and professors closely, like Reni Cao from UCSF and Harvard professors doing education and doing researches using Dex. I do think there is a substantial risk here, such that we as the entrepreneurs and we as the parents, we need to hold a high bar for ourselves and we roll out things one by one. So I guess that's why you will hear more about like, oh, Dex, like you could have done this, you could have made it more engaging. You will hear this much often, then you'll be like, oh, there's like an incident because we always prioritize safety first. We'd rather the device to be boring in a certain way rather than introducing consequences that we don't understand. So I think
Comes from the mindful design as well, yeah.
I do think there's a very interesting dynamic between the Western and Eastern in terms of their views about technology. And I don't think it's a family parenting only. It's also even like whole society, general perceptions. I'm happy to chat about that, but maybe it's a little bit of off topic here. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but we can definitely talk about that a little bit, but I kind of want to just follow up on what you just said. So how should a parent evaluate an AI device or tech device when they are purchasing for children, right? I'm sure there are different devices out there, maybe not exactly doing the same thing as what you're doing, but other devices are tech native or AI enabled for children. How should parents kind of go about this?
I'm not a parenting coach. I will share my views, right? Number one, I do think we should start from our needs first. Maybe let me put it this way. Don't get carried away with all the possibilities of the AI. Ask yourself, what is the unresolved parenting needs you have and find a solution there. Rather than, oh, this is AI X, then let's just buy that AI device and give it a try. That's number one. I would adopt that. Number two, I do think it's important to see what a company's method is. They definitely put their methodology somewhere, their belief somewhere, their principle somewhere, and they're like kind of like how you ask me about how we use ALM. I believe that the parents should definitely hold the company accountable to explain those details and ask, verify, and that's a crucial step. That's the due diligence on them, right? And I do think that finally, for any sort of like a product, I actually even think the parents doesn't have to be getting into this like searching and validating mental model. They could literally build their own in some sense, given all the agentic codings like rising up and reducing the piece, like the cost of software so low. I do think for a lot of stuff, they should try to accommodate their own parenting needs in certain ways. Like I saw tons of the parents go into cloud code, generating like almost like a story writer for their daughter. That's actually my previous colleague at Wish. And it was awesome. It's just different blanks to fit in. It's kind of Mad Libs type of like story. I do think the parents can change also their way that they are in the autonomy right now to build whatever they want to build. Having said, it's still a little bit of kind of like a Silicon Valley bubble type of answer because like, dude, honestly, in the world, the adoption of a cloud code is like probably less than 2% or 1%, I'm pretty sure. But I do think I would encourage parents to use AI themselves and explore a boundary. They can do what it can does well, what it doesn't. So then they kind of like make a decision from there.
Yeah, no, I think I appreciate that. It's a very like thoughtful answer because it's not just like A or B. of the day, I think it's parenting itself is so personal. It's on how your family dynamics work, how you prioritize your time, how you want to parent. So when you want to buy technology for your children or incorporate that into their lives, it's also a personal decision. I wanted to ask, actually, do you have any good case studies to share with us just a little bit?
We have quite a lot. What aspect? What type of case does you want?
Just like, I don't know, like things that unexpected people use. For me, like, I
All
mean,
right,
by
I'll give you
default, I
one.
just assume, yeah, people use it in urban areas, right? But then I think when I met you, you said, oh, actually, a lot of people use them, in unexpected places, like orders come through all over.
I immediately think about one thing. Almost like close to 5% of our users, they bought Dex to help with speech delay. That's something we never anticipated. But those parents are very frustrated with all the, as we call it, like sometimes autism tech or the speech therapy tech there. It's not meeting their bar. And they saw Dex, they'll be like, I would try everything right now for my kid. And surprisingly, Dex helped them and it makes them real happy. And you can find actually all those real reviews in our like a review sections. Quite a few family mentioned that their kids refuse to speak like a certain languages or just like even English, but that's kind of like necessitate the language as a fun activities. And all of a sudden the kids start to open up and speak more. And the parents are really happy about it. This same exact story happened with my co-founder, who is really worried about his, at that time, 2-year-old young son having speech delay. But I want to disclose the name, but the son, he actually, first time, spoken like coherent, like Chinese phrases using Dex, and he caught it on a video. That was one of the most wholesome moments of our kind of like a user feedback in our channel. And right now, we're actually volunteering to develop this special need mode that's kind of like customizing to special needs children, especially like April is the world kind of like autism awareness month. And yeah, we just want to do it, and we want to donate Dex to researchers and speech therapists to help us do it. This is a totally kind of like a side quest, but it just like
That's amazing.
gives us so much kind of like energy in thinking about technology can be used in a way that's like immensely helpful.
Yeah, and something unexpected, right? Um, okay, I think I want to wrap up our conversation because I don't take up too much of your time, but I do want to ask you one big macro question. With you working on whether you like to call it physical AI or not, essentially like you have physical product hardware times software, how do we understand that trend going forward? Do you think AI will be essentially integrated, plugged in to more and more hardware devices? What's your view on that?
I do think there is a consensus that every wave of software technology revolution, there will be kind of like a device revolution following that. We are at the tipping point there. That's like people starts to reimagine, where this is a cloud, this is the recording card, and maybe it should be separate like a AI, or this is a sort of like a little pendant that can kind of like ultimately listen to your life, help you organize things. I do think we're at the dawn of a next wave of hardwares, but it's less about we're doing the hardware because of the AI. I do think this is a software or technology driven type of hardware revolution out there. I do anticipate that. And I do, at least what I'm 100% sure is like smartphones are not designed for children. Tablets are not designed for children. Families deserve something built with their interest, their needs in the center of the spotlight. And I see that happening. And that's why we started this company. And I bet there's going to be tons more use cases there.
No, amazing. Thank you. I think one last thing. Is there anything I missed or anything you would like to share with us?
By the way, I have time. If you want to transfer all the questions, I'm happy to be here. I don't have anything else after this meeting.
Oh, no, don't worry. I think because a lot of times, like I use them as prompts, but when we're chatting, like we actually covered
Yeah.
most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you think we missed? But from my end, like I feel like I covered most of it. We did technology. We talked about children, AI, philosophy. Talked a bit about your business model.
Yeah.
I
don't
think
think
one
we
last
want to
one.
talk about. Yeah. Go
You
ahead.
go.
Go with one last one, and I have one for you. Yes. Go ahead. Ask yours
So
first.
I want to ask you one last question, which is a question I ask every guest that comes on the show. What is one differentiated view you hold? I feel like your whole thesis around, devices right now on the market are not made for children is already a differentiated view. But is there anything else you think that you hold that's non-consensus?
Yes. With this view, I got beaten up so many times, but I still gonna say it, right? I believe that education should not be cookie cutter. It should be highly personalized. So is entertainment. So is the parenting software. And we're about to enter the golden age. Finally, this is becoming a reality. And let me say it this way. You look at a school, in the US, how you tell the school is good or not, you look at one ratio. It's called a teacher-student ratio. One teacher taking care of, let's touch that. But why? Because like then the teacher can accommodate, individualize the needs. I actually have a very radical view in terms of like our education system is definitely lagging, um, significantly lagging against the kind of like how our society evolves, how the technology evolves. It's still sort of like a one size fit all and sort of like industrial way to handle education, handle like testing under testing. Doesn't really change in the past couple of decades, but the world is a different place now. And I guess my view is like it shouldn't be that. The default shouldn't be that. The default is like every kid should almost have their personalized tutor and a playmate that deeply understand them. Unfortunately, that's impossible before, sources wise. But I guess we need to strive to get there as a race, like as a humanity. Because like each kid just come with like their own spark. Pity that will miss out the window to make that spark their lifelong journey. But I'm not trying to attack on like educators or school system, something like that. I just feel like there needs to be more forces from the society, especially from the tech side, to help together build this alternative, enhanced kind of like a system that really delivers individualized like education. Sometimes I use the word scaled homeschooling, and you cannot imagine how much people hate that. People are like, homeschooling, you're taking away the social aspect of it. People are very constrained on the vocabulary of how they describe things. But I guess when I say homeschooling, it's not about keeping the kids at school and hiring teacher and that specific process right now. I'm talking about really meet children where they are in terms of their growth, in terms of their needs, in terms of like the skills they're going to develop. I call that a differentiator, but maybe actually a lot of people will share the same views. I'll be happy to know who share the same view, and please join us in the journey. Follow us along.
I think that view is definitely, I feel anecdotally, a lot more prevalent in SF when I visit. I've met other people like yourself, other people in the tech space, or, investors who are embracing this idea of modern homeschooling. And they say the same thing. They're like, we don't like to use the word homeschooling because, it sounds like a bit more cultish, but it really isn't, right? Like, it's really focusing on individual growth. I think it's amazing because I also think it's because Silicon Valley itself kind of harbors this kind of growth and mentality and that the fact that people can succeed without degrees, people can succeed by building different things, people can succeed in just being different and being themselves, but the best version of themselves have always been, I think, what drives a lot of people who want to go to Silicon Valley because it's like in many ways as a meritocracy, like the best version of meritocracy, right? I think in East Asia, even as I put my kid in school right now, I find people definitely a lot less like that minded. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing because, like, I grew up in Canada. For me, I always thought, having that freedom to learn, explore when you're young, which is more Western kind of way of, I guess, education, was good. But I think a lot of peers here actually believe that, for the first, like, say, 8 to 10 years, that foundational education should be drilled in. Grit should be taught, discipline should be taught. But it's very interesting because it does kind of, I guess, manufacture different kinds of stereotypes. And I think it's fascinating. And I think one more comment on that. I know this conversation has been more personal than we thought it would be, but I love it. I don't really get to talk about motherhood that much in my podcast. It's usually about tech and bros and tech bros about and about finance. But I think even when you have kids, people talk so much about nature versus nurture. And what I realized is how I was shocked to see the nature come through as young as like 6 to 8 months in a child. Their personality starts coming through, and by the time they're 1 to 1.5, they start kind of battling, start demanding things. I realized that 80% of it is all nature. It's like their preferences for how they socialize, their preferences of even noise, even you can realize like their taste. You're gonna find a 6 months old who just wants to sit in a corner in a play group, who just wants to flip through books, literally, and just undisturbed. You're gonna find someone who's screaming in the middle of the whole group. You're gonna find my daughter who's rolling over everyone and just like trying to knock everyone out. And I don't know why. You're gonna realize all of it is nature. And even, I believe, agency, autonomy, grit, and desire to actually succeed, that itself is nature. And I don't think you'd be taught. And I think this is a bit controversial. But definitely, I think my husband and I have been thinking a lot about this. We're like, we can just provide them what we can, but there is no point of even pushing them when they don't want certain things. So the best
Exactly.
is to push them in a direction that they want to be pushed, and they will tell you. I think this is like kind of the difference in our generation parents. But yeah, Reni, thank
Yeah.
you so
But
much.
can I,
Yeah,
I know
go.
this is over time, but can I add one last comment towards
No,
what you
of
say?
course, of course.
But I think what you said, like, especially growing up in East Asian, like, education system, it has been industrial for a good reason, right? At a time where stuff like AI doesn't exist, the most effective way to develop fundamental like knowledge workers, plus finishing the job of like dividing the children into different segments and give them different levels of education, like that education system works perfectly. I mean, entrance exam, as I'm talking about, like taking like standard tests and stuff like that. But all we know that is AI is sweeping through all the knowledge works and specialized knowledge works, especially Asian parents like favorite jobs like being a doctor, especially radiologist, and or being a lawyer. You gotta start somewhere as associate. Now it's getting kind of like his hardest. The world has already changed. The tsunami already hits, but I don't think people actually understand the level of a lot of like everyday people in the world, they haven't felt this like a tsunami, right? So when you say you want to kind of like, define your children's nature and push them towards kind of like what they are intrinsically motivated about and give them resources, set them up for success, building grids along the way, I do believe that I think I will 100% agree with you that it will become the most fundamental aspect or element of education in the next like 5 years or even sooner, to be fair.
I
That's why
feel
I don't
very
send my
validated.
to put it in the same portent. I don't send my daughter to Kumon. I don't want my daughter to do Russian math. I never benchmark her against like, oh, like the other kids can read at the age of like 3.5. Why don't you? Actually, I don't, because I fully understand that kids have their own time zone. Kids have their own spark. All you need to do is think deeply to define that, to understand that, understand why my daughter sometimes is super sensitive, understand why sometimes she got frustrated and want to hit. Don't take that on the surface level. With
100%.
all the tools you have, go deep, understand that, and build these programs that's personalized to her and help her. And I think like this is why I think if we talk about the word 内卷 a lot. If I have to jam on anything, right, I have to like rather like ruthless compete on anything, I complete the depth understanding of my daughter rather than anything else. Because I actually think that's the thing people gloss over. People just be like, education is just like, it's just checklist. You're gonna check.
Yeah.
Check. And there's a better checkbox, like Ivy League school, there's a okay checkbox, there's a worse checkbox. Forget about the checklist. That checklist is obsolete already.
100%.
So I respect,
No, I agree with you.
I think we vibe together. It's like in terms of our schools of parenting.
Parenting style. Yeah.
But you're so fully intuitive. I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but this is what I firmly believe in. And I believe someone's going to join this journey.
I think there's more people who are aware, especially people who are more plugged in with the technology, because they realize how fundamental it's like society will change. Like I just thought about like, when we were young, I'm sure your parents also like told you to go to university, go to this, go to that, right? For sure there was a hierarchy in their mind, what kind of school you should go to, what kind of degree you should get. Now I really don't think that's the case. Actually, a lot of my readers would even know my dad really pushed me, encouraged me to go into finance. And at one point, he was like, if you don't study finance and don't work in finance, you're not like following my footsteps and blah, 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 right? And it became a personal reason to do it. It's not because I wanted to or I was good at it. And there was actually a battle between us being like, I want to go into journalism. And he's like, no. I was like, well, no, but I'm going to go to journalism. He's like, I'm not going to pay for it. You figure it out. But the beauty of it is I actually found a way, resourceful enough to get a full scholarship. And I still went into journalism. Again, I recognize how lucky I was. I found the opportunity to do that. But most kids actually just end up then doing what their parents told them to do. And they never actually live their best life or become the best versions of themselves because they're doing something not actually fundamentally.
You hit a very critical, I think it's a background or context. There wasn't abundance before, right? Growing up, let's say in the 80s, right? It's a relatively kind of like a society. It's a relatively kind of like not that sort of like, you wouldn't call it abundance at the time. Let me just put it that way, right? You still need to compete for stability, compete for resources. That's why there's a rat race in education, which I totally understand. That's kind of like, it's like a whole economy there, right? But I think that changed. No matter if we're talking about like mainland China, we're talking about the US right now. I think abundance really will hit at some point of time. At that time, the challenge shifted from how can I, avoid getting into poverty or like job loss towards kind of like, how can I find the meaning of my life and how do I deal with this kind of like a journey? It's a generational theme there. It's very funny that your dad wants you to go into finance rather than journalism. I mean, like for those who understand like a Chinese internet a little bit, recently there has been a famous like influencer called Zhang Xuefeng, right? He's like almost like helps everyone to pick their college major. And one of the college major he hates the most and advises everyone to not go to is actually journalism at the end of the day. Because it's just not a stereotypically stable job that can make a lot of money and can give you social status, quote unquote, stuff like that. But I think that's a lacked view of things. Our dad doesn't know how our skill landscape gonna be 20 years later. Just like we're not gonna know what our kids gonna deal with. So we need to give them a more sort of like a generalized resources and the skills and grit to survive. And it's funny enough, I named my daughter Simone because we're big fans of Simone de Beauvoir, the kind of like foundational philosopher of feminism and a lot of like a sociology thoughts. So if I have to set up expectation for my daughter, I want her to actually do something that's not commonly seen as a very like a prosperous or stable kind of like career ladder. I want her to do something that's kind of like has a mission and some sort of like outlier, a type of journey. And let's see how that goes. She's so young, so who knows?
I love it. All right. Thank you so much, Reni.
Thank you. Thanks.